Now, Defence Minister Angie Motshekga has defended her heavily criticised 57 billion rand budget vote, with more than 60% of the budget going to salaries. Opposition parties and experts have slammed the budget, warning the further weakening of the SANDF. However, Motshekga says her department will do everything to maximise on the little it has. I'm now joined by Ricardo Teixeira, a defence analyst, for more on this. Ricardo, a very good evening to you. A shocking figure indeed, even though the minister has justified this, but 64% exact to be spent on salaries and other things that don't necessarily include the day-to-day of the defence and kind of the gear as well. Talk to us a bit more about this.
So I must preface by saying that in any military, because it is a labor-intensive organization and a labor-intensive field, salaries are going to make up a large part of your budget. But in countries like the US or in some of the NATO countries, you still see salaries between the 30 and 50% range. And it really depends on the country and is indicative of how much is actually spent on the human part of the organization. But the bigger problem for SANDF is that while they've got that 64% that is being spent on salaries, not much else has money being spent on it. So they're losing their money for training, and they don't have much operational budget at the current moment.
Let's talk about just some of the criticism that the SANDF has gotten in recent months as well when it comes to just the livelihood of the soldiers as well. They've also said that they're going to take a soldier-first approach, but also when it comes to things like having a military jet, having operational devices that are needed.
So yes, it is good to see them put some emphasis back on the troops. There's been a shortage of boots and uniforms for a long time, and the morale amongst the rank and file at the moment is quite low. So it is good to see that approach. But yes, there needs to be a lot more funding for maintenance, for training, for operations, because the institution and SANDF and all the various functions that have rely on very large systems. We're talking about ships, we're talking jets, armored vehicles, artillery pieces, drones. They are things that need to be maintained. And this has been a long-standing issue in the Defence Force when we look at their equipment, is that things have not been maintained and the funding has just not been there. And it has caused a long-standing crisis in the availability of these platforms.
Speaking of maintenance as well, allocated in this budget is 300 million rand that will go to maintenance and emergency repairs, but also in terms of technology, 200 million rand allocated for procurement of vehicles, technology, and also for technology for border safeguarding. And that is something that has been quite topical as well when we're talking about our borders as well.
So that comes from a funding injection that happened, I think, the previous financial year, early 2023 to 2024, and there was a tender out for armored vehicles. So this is funding that's been around for a while and has been earmarked to be spent. But this is, we're talking cents on the rand here in terms of what they should be spending. That 300 million, just to give you a bit of a ballpark, the EFF in their document put the figure there for maintaining the frigates and for their midlife upgrade for the 4 ships. Now, I'm not sure if it's a 100% accurate number, but it's well within the ballpark, and that number is 10 billion. We're talking between 2 and 2.2 billion per ship to do the midlife upgrades. So 300 million in that regard is very little.
And staying with the EFF as well and its criticism of this, they had said that this budget prioritizes international debt repayments over the dignity of the troops themselves, even though we're hearing that they are going back to a soldier-first approach.
Yes, again, there are so many issues with the funding that. So currently, at the current moment, the only thing they really can afford to do is to pay their salaries and to keep a couple things going. And is that really going to be a soldier-first approach when you have troops that won't have equipment to use? I mean, you've got several thousand troops that are attached to artillery, aviation, and in the Navy and the ships. Is it a soldier-first approach when their systems and the job they're meant to do is unable to be carried out because they don't have the systems they were trained on anymore?
And just before I let you go as well, we're obviously seeing the increase of wars as well as time goes by. South Africa doesn't seemingly face a direct threat of war and that is imminent, but what are the dangers of having troops without equipment?
Well, yes, we're not seeing any immediate threats, but threats have a habit of materializing a lot faster than you can prepare for them. And, as the age-old saying I like to quote always goes, you don't go to war with the army you want, you go to war with the army you have. And it's your insurance policy. And if you haven't spent that money building up the force, building up the capability and the shed full of equipment that you're going to need to reach into, when you need it and it's not there, you can't just make it appear. This is something that requires a commitment and long-term thinking, and is ultimately essential to our national security and our national survival.
Now, I know you're a military specialist, but while I have you as well, and we're talking about, national security, of course, hot of the topics has been the General Mkhwanazi's revelations about just how much interference there is in the SAPS. Very serious allegations as well at that. The president will be speaking to us tomorrow regarding that. But if you're looking at the state of our military and you're looking at the state of our SAPS, where does that leave South Africa in terms of security?
It leaves us incredibly vulnerable. While it is the military's role to defend the borders and national security and threats from outside the country, it is the police's job to maintain law and order. And I'm glad you brought this up, because SANDF is not the only department in the security cluster that requires a complete restructuring and a complete rethink. SAPS is there with them, as is the SSA. But unfortunately, all three of these departments rely on a document known as the National Security Strategy, which is going to guide our national security priorities and our foreign policy priorities into the next 10, 15 years. And Minister in the Presidency, Khumbudzo Ntshavheni, promised during her budget plenary speech last year on 15 July 2024 that she would release the National Security Strategy as it was approved by Cabinet and the 6th Parliamentary Administration. She promised to release it in September 2024, and it is yet to be released. I know the DA has inquired about it. Rise Mzansi mentioned it in the budget debate for defense earlier this week. This is an essential document that is going to guide both our policing, our national security, our defense, and our intelligence priorities, and it is seemingly missing. So while we've got all these problems with police and defense, and we're looking towards the future, we need to paint that road, and the government doesn't seem to want to put that document out.
Concerning indeed. Ricardo, thank you so much for your time this evening. That, of course, was a defense specialist, Ricardo Teixeira.
What makes a strong army? Is it tanks, helicopters, or elite training? According to defense analyst Ricardo Teixeira, the answer lies somewhere far more human, in the well-being of the soldiers themselves. And that's exactly where South Africa's latest defense budget is turning heads. Defense Minister Angie Motshekga has tabled a massive R57 billion budget for the Department of Defense. But what's really grabbing attention is the fact that over 60% of that, more than R34 billion, is being allocated to salaries. That's right. The majority of our defense budget is going straight into the pockets of personnel. Some say that's a problem. Teixeira says it's a necessity. Let's break this down. South Africa's military, once considered among the most capable in Africa, has faced years of decline. Equipment is outdated, morale is shaky, bases and facilities have deteriorated, and young professionals, including engineers and technicians, have been leaving for better-paying jobs elsewhere. So when Minister Motshekga stood up in Parliament and declared that the health and stability of our troops must be a priority, it signaled a shift in strategy. Ricardo Teixeira says this is a positive move. Why? Because no matter how advanced your weapons are, they mean nothing if your people aren't trained, focused, and motivated. You can't build a strong defense force on the backs of underpaid, overworked personnel. And South Africa's military has, for years, suffered from exactly that. Still, not everyone agrees. Opposition parties were quick to criticize the budget breakdown. They argue that too much focus on salaries takes away from critical investments in operational readiness, things like vehicle maintenance, fuel, intelligence gathering, and border protection. They also questioned whether the current leadership has a plan to modernize the armed forces, or if this budget is just another band-aid on a deeper wound. Experts in defense economics warn that simply throwing money at salaries won't solve the broader problems facing the South African National Defense Force. Corruption, mismanagement, and inefficient procurement remain major hurdles. There are concerns that unless the department reforms its systems and planning, even a well-intentioned budget will struggle to deliver real results. But let's zoom out. In a world of increasing geopolitical instability, from Russia's actions in Ukraine, to tensions in the Middle East and China's expanding military footprint, every country has to ask itself how prepared it really is. South Africa sits at a crucial strategic location. With over 2,500 kilometers of coastline and critical trade routes, our national defense capability isn't just about war, it's about sovereignty, security, and stability. And that's where Ricardo Teixeira's comments become important. Investing in people isn't a luxury. It's foundational. Trained, respected, and well-paid soldiers are more likely to stay in the system, pass on their knowledge, and serve with dedication. If your personnel are demoralized or constantly leaving for better opportunities, then you're constantly rebuilding, and never getting stronger. So what's next? Can the Defense Department take this R57 billion and turn it into something meaningful? Can they address the skills shortages, rebuild operational strength, and restore pride in the uniform? That's the challenge. In the end, it's not about salaries versus spending on gear. It's about balance. It's about making sure that every cent in that R57 billion is used to strengthen the nation, not just maintain the status quo. South Africa needs a military that works, not just on paper, but on the ground. And that begins with valuing the people who wear the uniform. The critics will continue to shout. But if the soldiers are finally being heard, maybe that's the first step in rebuilding what was lost.